Starting in Russian Fishing 4 with the telescopic rod gives you the opportunity within just a few minutes to catch a large number of fish and to gain very good experience points. How exactly you use the telescopic rod and what you need to pay attention to, I will show you in this video. Yes, the beginning of Russian Fishing 4 is of course always a bit difficult because you have to learn an insane amount of things. And of course, you also do not really master the handling of the different rods properly yet. And especially with the telescopic rod, this is a very important topic because with the telescopic rod, it directly depends on you. So when do you strike at the right moment so that the fish actually stays hooked? So if you have already taken the first steps in R4 and notice that things are not working so well with the telescopic rod, then it is simply because you are lacking practice in float fishing. Or maybe you are missing one or two tricks, or you are simply completely missing the knowledge of how to properly use the telescopic rod. And that is exactly what we are going to look at now in detail so that you can also catch a lot of fish with the telescopic rod within just a few minutes, especially here at Elk Lake. So with the appearance of this new water body, we have the opportunity to gain a really large amount of experience points to make very good percentage progress in the fishing method and therefore to advance really fast. In the start tutorial and in the video what to buy under level 20, I recommend in both cases, of course, the starter setup with the telescopic rod and ideally the whole thing 3 times. However, do not overdo it at the beginning, especially at the start. First test everything with just one telescopic rod and try to really get comfortable with it. And the better that works, the more telescopic rods you then add into your rotation. This is similar to juggling. Maybe at the beginning you first take 1 ball, at some point you take 2 balls, and suddenly the whole thing just flies here with 3 balls all by itself. So we start here with the telescopic rod, the correct assembly, and what you need to pay attention to. There is also a detailed video about that. Especially when using the telescopic rod, it is essential to know how to assemble your setup so that the telescopic rod does not break. If you make mistakes here, this usually leads to your entire rod breaking. So definitely check out the video on how to correctly assemble the setup. I am fishing here at this spot at Elk Lake simply with an earthworm. And on the keyboard, on the numeric keypad, we can easily adjust the depth with the plus and minus keys. 50 centimeters is not bad at all. 1 meter can also be tested quite well. I have now set one of my rods to 50 centimeters and another one to 1 meter, just to first test which depth works really well. So we cast out the telescopic rod first, and with the telescopic rod, it is always recommended not to cast at maximum distance, but to always leave the line a little bit slack. That means if we cast out to the maximum, the line is of course relatively tight. And if we then also place the rod down, that naturally leads to having full tension directly from the line, so to speak, all the way to the rod. And when we then pick it up because something twitches, you can already see it right at the front. That means the float already moves in that moment, and that can cause the fish to be spooked immediately. So as a general rule, always make sure that the line with the telescopic rod is slightly slack so that you have the possibility to pick up the rod early and hook the fish at exactly the right moment. There are 2 ways to do this. One option is, of course, to simply not load up fully. And if you only load up loosely like that, you can see that now we have enough line here and can then just calmly leave the rod standing like this. And there it already goes down. And there we already have the first fish immediately. Very nice. The other option is, of course, a significantly faster option. And this becomes really important when you're fishing with 3 rods at the same time. And that means when float fishing, you simply press W, A, S, and D. That means you actively use the movement keys. You are not just standing there completely stiff and casting one telescopic rod after another, but you actively move. This also becomes essential later when we want to catch significantly larger fish, because even with the telescopic rod, it is of course possible to catch very large fish. And sometimes it's extremely necessary that we move slightly forward and backward so that we can pull the fish closer. We will get to that later though. So the second option, load up fully, cast all the way out, and then, as mentioned, still move a bit. I was already standing a bit further back. That means if you now stand further forward here, cast at maximum distance, then maybe step back a little bit, pull the line slightly, and then place the rod down. That means we now again have the line a bit looser on the surface. We still have the option to simply pick it up. And at the same time, we can see that there is not too much line on the surface. Too much line on the surface means when you see the float going down and then press the left mouse button to strike, there is a very long distance until the line finally becomes tight. And that in turn means that the strike usually fails. And that again means that in order not to have so much line on the surface, we need to move again. If, for example, you want to fish very close in this area here, you can, of course, in theory, simply cast your rod very loosely. But then you can see that there is an insane amount of line here. Later in the game, we want to buy longer telescopic rods, 7 meter, 8 meter long telescopic rods, because with such a long telescopic rod, we naturally also have the same amount of line and can accordingly go deeper down or also cast further out. Nevertheless, with such a long telescopic rod, you will of course also want to fish in close range, meaning very close to the bank. And accordingly, you simply use your movement keys and do not stand directly at the water, but instead further back. You then cast loosely and can fish just the same way here, close to the bank. So directly where you basically want to have your bait, you simply move the entire character further back. So always remember, movement is important when float fishing. Always walk forward and backward from time to time so that everything works really well. And above all, so that it works really well when striking at the right moment. I am now casting out all 3 rods. So loosely cast out. The second one here also loosely cast out. So always move a little bit. A bit of line is on the surface, and now we have all 3 next to each other. Of course, the rods are placed on the shortcuts. All information about the key bindings, how you also set your baits to different depths, even if you do not have a numeric keypad on your keyboard. And all of that will still be explained in the basic tutorial about the key bindings. Yes. And now, of course, it means waiting and first figuring out what do the fish actually want. Because of course, when float fishing, we first want to find out whether the fish like our bait. And what is even more important, because we can present the baits at different depths, we can of course also find out much better where the fish are currently holding. And that is a very essential point in float fishing. While in bottom fishing, the baits in most cases simply stay on the bottom. With float fishing, we naturally have the option to fish close to the surface, in the midwater, or close to the bottom, or even on all levels in between, because we can simply decide that ourselves. However, we also have to decide that ourselves if we want to fish effectively here. And for that, you of course need a lot of knowledge again. Knowledge about the different fish species, where the fish usually hold, but also knowledge about where to fish at different times of day or weather conditions. In the evening hours, for example, it is recommended to go further down. That means I am now going here towards 1.5 meters depth, and then we simply cast out again. So 1 step back, 1 step forward, loosely cast out, and then simply present the bait a bit deeper again. So exactly this playing around with the different depths is essential in float fishing. Of course, on such a starting water, this does not matter that much. So here, this is not quite as relevant, but later on, this becomes absolutely essential. So from level 12 waters onward, pay very close attention to how deep the spot actually is where you're currently fishing, and at which depths the fish are holding. Ideally, take notes about this if you are really interested in progressing very effectively in float fishing. I also have to become active here now because nothing is happening right now. That in turn means I'm now adjusting the depths differently. I now have the first rod at 1.5 meters, the second one at 1.8 meters, and this one here we set to 2 meters depth. So that one is also loosely cast out. And of course we first let it sink down. And here we have bottom contact. And we can of course see, besides the bottom contact, that the float simply does not stand up. You can of course also make use of that if you simply want to leave the bait lying on the bottom. You can theoretically fish like this on the bottom, with the bait lying on the bottom, and the float rod. but ideally we want to have the bait just above the bottom. So I now go here to 1.9 meters depth and simply cast to the same spot again. And there we still have bottom contact. So between 1.8 meters and 1.9 meters, because the float at 1.8 meters depth is still standing, and 1.9 meters then already does not stand anymore. Cast just a little bit further, and the float already stands up again, because the ground usually slopes down slightly as well, and there is already something on it. Cast out just now, and the next fish comes here close to the bottom, the warmouth. Very nice. So I immediately cast out again to the spot with almost bottom contact, so directly close to the bottom, and now I also lower the other rods here to 1.8 meters depth. Yes, I have now changed the spot, because that is of course also necessary when nothing is happening somewhere. Well, then we of course move on and test another spot. Testing is the be-all and end-all in fishing anyway. Without testing, you do not get good results. So directly here at the boat dock, simply loosely cast out again. In this case now, only at 60 centimeters depth. Because here you can already see that the bottom is directly visible. That means we have a very shallow area here, 60 centimeters depth. That means we're now already almost directly close to the bottom. And here the first small warmouth are already going in. Warmouth is, for example, a fish that likes to stay close to the bottom. And if you know that, you can then fish for this fish very specifically, and accordingly also complete café orders in a targeted way. Additionally, we are now of course also currently at night. That generally means fewer fish, and some fish species cannot be found at night at all. Other fish species, on the other hand, are found exclusively at night. Let us use the time at night and also take a look at the different rig types for float fishing. We of course start with the simple fixed float rig, but depending on the area of use, you will have to switch the rigs again and again. One of the most popular rig types among float anglers is the sliding float rig. You can use the fixed float rig very well, for example when fishing in current and also placing the rods there. We will take a detailed look at that again at the Winding Rivulet in a moment. And the carp hair rig, we will also take a detailed look at that in a moment with the larger account. When it comes to skill points, you also distribute your skill points as a float angler, of course mainly into the float fishing area. Here too, you then have to decide, what do you actually want to do over the course of the game? Do you really want to focus completely on telescopic rod fishing? Then invested skill points into the telescopic rod are of course worthwhile. If you only use the telescopic rod as a bridge to later move towards the bolognese rod or the match rod, then do not invest skill points here into this telescopic rod. Those 7 skill points are then invested much better into the different rig types, so either into the fixed float rig or later on into the sliding float rig. With my small tutorial account, I have not distributed any skill points at all so far. I am now level 13 on the account. I already have 30% in float fishing, and I still have 12 skill points available. With most fishing methods, it is the case that invested points into a rig type bring you significantly more than invested points into the rod. Especially in the low and mid-level range, the invested points into the rod are not that essential. Both casting distance, casting accuracy, and fish control are, as mentioned, not that important on the starting waters because we usually do not cast very far anyway. That means we gain nothing from having more casting distance, and we also do not gain that much from having more accuracy because especially within the first 10 to 15 meters, you can still cast very precisely to a spot. And fish control is also not that essential at the beginning. However, this becomes very, very important in the endgame. But by the time you reach the endgame, you will of course again have plenty of points available to invest into the rod and then to have more fish control. Is float fishing even worth it at all? Float fishing has been clearly boosted by Russian Fishing 4 over the last few years. Or rather, there are simply new waters where you can fish very effectively with a float. This way, you continuously have the opportunity to progress with float fishing, earn skill points, and the good thing is, you always have an effective alternative way to catch fish. So for example, If in the spinning area on the Balaya the trout do not want to bite at the moment, then just try float fishing there instead. And try to outsmart the trout on the Balaya with insect baits. And the huge advantage of float fishing later on is the bait combination. That means you can use two baits at the same time on one hook, for example potato and dew worm. And in Russian Fishing 4 it works like this. One bait attracts and the other bait attracts. And 1 plus 1 in Russian Fishing 4 equals 2.5. So one attracts, the other attracts, and the combination of both attracts a little bit as well. That means the combination of both baits has a slight additional attraction effect. That is why later on, especially this bait combination is an absolute powerhouse. And it is absolutely worth having skill towards this by the end game, because you can outsmart numerous fish very effectively with it. It has now become light, and the fish are of course directly back again. So quickly cast out again. Best to cast everything out fresh again, because they have already moved things around here a bit. So loosely cast out, here again with movement. Zack, zack, out and back in. Briefly walked back and forth so that you have enough line on the surface, but not too much line on the surface. And now we can get started here. Especially in the morning hours, you have to be quick now, because you usually have a pretty good bite frequency. And directly the next one here, and the warmth. And there goes the next one, and quickly again. No, that was already too late. Yes, that is exactly the point. So if this is too fast and too hectic for you, it can actually become stressful. Then start with one rod, or maybe with two rods. Just stay nicely active, one after the other, alternating cleanly, so that it does not become too stressful. And there goes the next one, directly. But of course, when there is so much biting, we also have the opportunity to catch significantly more fish. What am I doing here when striking? So ultimately, in this phase, I'm simply waiting for the float to go down. I strike immediately, because especially here at this water, the perch-like fish are very aggressive, and I can simply strike immediately here with the left mouse button pressed. Now we have a very large fish here. This could already be close to being a trophy. Net out, and that is a trophy. That is of course really nice. We gladly take that. That also gives us some really nice percentage progress again. That is really cool. And accordingly, directly loosely cast out again and place the rod. There we go. And as could be seen just now with the trophy, or with this heavy fish, I basically walk straight backwards. And by doing that, I also pull the fish closer. So when you have a heavy fish on the telescopic rod, you hold the left mouse button the entire time and try the whole time to keep the rod as high as possible. If it does not go up, you might have to walk a bit forward so that it can go up more easily again. So this movement. Oh wow, now we have two sides at the same time. Oh dear, and both lost. Yes, that is also typical. So quickly both cast out again. So the moment something heavy is on, always try to push the rod up with the left mouse button. And there we already have the next one on. So push up, hold, 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 and then walk back a bit so that the fish comes in more easily. Or if you notice that the rod goes down again because the fish is so heavy, you have to walk forward so that you can lift the rod again. And there is already the next one again, but that one already got away again. You can literally see it moving here. So quickly cast out again. Also here, quickly cast out again. Pull the rod and the float slightly to where it should go, and then watch. Strike again at exactly the right moment, and pull it in loosely. One option that makes striking a bit easier is to strike in a slightly rounded motion. So if you just pull straight up, it regularly happens that the hook does not set properly. And if you pull it a bit to the side, and then press the left mouse button, you often get a better effect. Now we have two here right now. Oh, that one is already hooked. So here again, walk back a bit, walk forward one step again, and then you have it, and directly the next one right away. There we have it as well. Yes, Zach hooked again. Here now, pull back a bit again. That was with too little line on the surface. And then we directly have the next one, and pull it in loosely. Yes, here we now see the entire first row. So these 5 fish here, all under 1 minute. You can see that during the day, when the frequency is really good, you can comfortably catch 3 times the amount of fish with 3 floats relative to minutes. But it does indeed require some practice, and you of course need to have the right spot, meaning a position where this works so well. Now let us take a look at float fishing at the Winding Rivulet. Here we have current, so flowing water, and we simply go onto a dock here. The advantage is that when we are on such a dock, we are already further out. And because with the telescopic rod, we are somewhat limited in the distance we can cast, such a dock is really worthwhile for float fishing. Here at the Winding Rivulet, however, I need new baits and also a different hook. We go significantly smaller here. So hooks, classic hooks. We of course take the ones with good quality. Size 24 is sold out. Size 22, size 20 would be an option. I am a huge fan of size 18. That is the smallest size of the small hooks. One size smaller and the hooks would already be tiny, so we're just one size larger here. I am now buying 3 pieces of those. And of course, as recommended so often, we take the entire bait box once again. We unpack that here and change our setup here once using the size 18 hooks. Then we take caster here and go to about 35 centimeters depth. That is a depth that works quite well again and again. Again, loosely cast out. And now we are active here. We have drift fishing enabled and have to actively accompany the whole thing. We could theoretically walk along the entire time. You can do that at the very beginning if you first want to see where the fish are actually biting. So before you place yourself somewhere, you simply walk along a bit, test this bait. This would be a bait that usually works quite well for fishing for dace. And there is already something on it. And we already have it directly. Very nice. And with that, we have caught the first bleak here on caster. That means if we now want to catch bleak again, we either move back or simply stay here. We of course cast a bit further back so that it can drift through the same area again, and then we just let it drift through the area once more. And there we have the next fish directly. Yes, that already looks good. It seems as if bleak can be found at this spot, and that the bleak currently likes this bait, meaning caster, this pupated maggot. For bleak, fly is also always worth using as a bait. That is an even better bait. And now we already have something a bit bigger. Yes, roach also included, and we directly get the next percentages. Very good. And like this, if it works like this at the spot, you could of course simply cast out all 3 rods and would then have a lot of action here because everything is drifting continuously. And if that is too stressful for you, you now have the option with the fixed float rig to set this 30 centimeters depth. And even if we then place the rod down here, whoa, there is already the next one on. And even if we place the rod down here, we will do that now right here in front. So loosely cast out, place the rod down. The float is now drifting and will now soon land in the tightened line and then stop. It might now move a bit more into the current. But now in this position, we have the line up to the float, and below that, the set 35 centimeters from earlier. With the sliding float rig, it is different. The float continues to drift. So due to the current, the float basically runs to this point here, meaning to these 18 centimeters, and then stops there in this case. But that only applies when using the sliding float rig. That means we can now, of course, simply place our rods directly into the current here. So loosely cast straight into the current, and then we can simply wait until something bites. 1, 2, 3 rods, and we then see that all 3 floats now align nicely with the current. And the line is of course now completely tight. Now the situation is this: in the moment when the fish goes down, here on rod number 2 right now, and on number 3 as well, both with earthworm as bait, we now have to time it exactly when the fish has really gone down, and then immediately press the left mouse button and pull in. So this is extremely difficult. Luckily, we have a few perch here. They are a bit easier to hook because they are so aggressive. Otherwise, with this fishing method, it can repeatedly happen that you get missed bites, and now it starts here in the middle. And again, wait. And at exactly the right moment, when the float has really gone down, strike, immediately hold the left mouse button, hold, 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 and then the perch already comes in here. So this is also something you can do in the current. However, there are different fish species that really like this drift fishing. And if we have the possibility to use such a presentation method, like this drift fishing, then of course we can use it very effectively. Loosely cast out here with one rod. Drift fishing is active, and then we simply let the baits drift through freely, and we look for a spot where bites keep happening again and again. Yes, and from earlier we already knew that this works here at the front, and theoretically we can of course now also stand here with two rods. I will quickly rebuild those as well, again with the small size 18 hook and caster. Then we go here to maybe only 20 centimeters depth, and then we loosely cast out. And now we simply cast both rods alternating, always directly into this area. You can see I also automatically keep pressing the Y key, or rather the Z key, to zoom because I always want to see exactly where are the floats right now. Is there already something on or not? And directly switch again here and immediately cast out again. Here it can even be recommended not to cast too far so that the floats can drift for a longer time. And there we already have something on. Very good. The next Bleak. By the way, Bleak is also very much worth it, both in terms of experience points and selling price. Dace is also really worth it here. Now we see here on the first one it has already drifted through, but the oops, misclicked. But there was already something on it, and it even hooked. Very nice. Here we have something a bit thicker. A small chub. No, another roach. Okay, so directly cast back again, let it drift through once more, and keep the whole thing in view the entire time. That can, of course, be a bit stressful as well, but it is very, very, very effective. Especially fishing for Dace and Bleak is really worth it here at the Winding Rivulet. And you can also fish very close range here. That means you can simply flick the float back a little bit and just cast again. You see there we already have one, and just cast again. And directly the next one here. Yes, and that way you of course have the opportunity with these simple fish at the starting waters to just check which cafe orders are active, and then continue fishing nicely at the spots accordingly. We now have Bleak active here. We also have Roach active, so two cafe orders that can be completed very quickly here. And this way you can simply check, especially at the starting waters, Mosquito Lake, Elk Lake, and Winding Rivulet, which cafe orders are available. And especially at the starting waters, you can usually complete the orders from the first row very well. And the last Roach also went in. Yes, so we just earned a nice 26 silver extra here, just with small Roach and Bleak. Yes, and of course, in the mid-game and endgame, you can also use the telescopic rod. Make sure to check out the videos about what to buy from level 20. There, suitable telescopic rods are recommended, or other advanced float rods, like a suitable bolognese rod, or even a match rod from level 20. For the endgame, on the other hand, the very heavy telescopic rods are recommended. In this case, the Blade Inferno 800. And here you can of course also use additional rig types very effectively. I am currently actively using the sliding float rig. For carp fishing, however, I am now using the carp hair rig. And here we again see components that are necessary. That means we need a leader, ideally a mono leader, because with monofilament line, we have very nice stretch, and that in turn is our playing effect. So through this stretch effect of the line and the rod, we try to tire out heavy fish. Then we also need a size 1 hook, and then we can, just like with the classic hair rig in bottom fishing, choose sinking boilies. With this combination, we now of course go back to the spot and have to follow all the rules of carp fishing. A spot that currently works quite well is here at the front, near the water lilies. Theoretically, I would of course first have to analyze the spot. That means which fish are at the spot and which bait do they currently like. And accordingly, I would then of course also have to prepare a suitable ground bait mix. The first thing I always need to know, however, is how deep is it at that spot? So we first take a look at the map and see that this darker area here is displayed with about 1.3 meters depth. That means it will be at least 1.3 meters deep here in this area, maybe even deeper. I go to about 1.8 meters depth and then cast out at maximum distance. Then I also position the float exactly where it should be, so here at the edge of the water lilies. And I see that I still have not reached bottom proximity, and this is how you then try things out step by step at the beginning. In the mid-game and endgame, you can of course buy an extra rod for this over time. With such a marker rod, you can on the one hand set the distance precisely, and on the other hand, determine exactly how deep it is at the position after casting. The marker float is now lying on the surface. We pull the line in a bit, and then we see that back there, where the float is now, it is 3.1 meters deep. I have now set the baits to 2.3 meters depth, and it already seems to start right away, and all of this without any ground bait in the water. How all of this works with the different water temperatures and the different zones is far too complex to squeeze all of that into this video. There will be a separate video for that entirely focused on carp fishing. For bottom fishing or float fishing, the same rules apply everywhere. And there we already have something quite big on. And now I have to walk a bit forward so that the fish comes up first. And now I slowly walk back. And now, of course, I take out the net, and then we have it very nicely. So 6 kilograms, that already caused a lot of pressure on the rod. Nevertheless, with these very large and heavy rods, you can of course catch significantly heavier fish. What is important, however, as you may have just seen again, is this movement. You really have to make sure that you stay in motion so that the rod goes as far upwards as possible, because only when it is pulled all the way up do you get this maximum playing effect from the rod and from the monofilament line, which works almost like a rubber band and therefore tires the fish out or absorbs the head shakes and the fish's movement. So the whole topic of telescopic rod fishing is worth it. It is also actually fun once you have figured out how it really works. That was a short insight into the entire topic of telescopic rod fishing. If telescopic rod fishing does not really bring you that much joy overall, check out the next videos in the float fishing playlist about Bolognese fishing or match fishing. Especially with match fishing, the focus is even more on carp fishing, meaning further details on how to properly fish for carp with float fishing. If this helped you, leave a thumbs up. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel because that helps me a lot. And then I will see you in the next video or in the next live stream on Twitch. Until then, tight line.